Good afternoon, I'm Katie Wilson and you are watching AnewZ. Let's see your headlines. Donald Trump announced the completion of a major prisoner swap between Russia and Ukraine. US Homeland Security blocks Harvard's ability to enroll international students. Türkiye is to provide Syria with 2 billion cubic meters of gas annually. US President Donald Trump announced on Friday that a major prisoner swap between Russia and Ukraine has just been completed. He congratulated both sides and hinted that it could lead to something big in a post on Truth Social. Ukraine had submitted a list of 1,000 prisoners of war to Russia in preparation for the exchange, according to Ukrainian military intelligence on Thursday. The agreement for the swap was reached earlier this month in Istanbul during the first direct talks between Russia and Ukraine in over 3 years. President Vladimir Putin says Russia is establishing a buffer zone along its border with Ukraine. The announcement follows Putin's visit to the border region at Kursk in a phone call with President Trump. Both leaders discussed peace prospects, with Putin thanking Trump for backing resumed talks between Moscow and Kyiv. Putin claims the war is now on a path towards resolution and says the move is aimed at enhancing security. The European Parliament has approved sweeping tariff hikes on fertilizers and farm products from Russia and Belarus. The move aims to curb Russian war funding and protect EU food security. Meanwhile, Moscow calls the tariff hikes self-defeating. The tariffs take effect from July the 1st.
The European Parliament approved significant tariff increases on fertilizers and agricultural imports from Russia and Belarus, aiming to reduce EU dependence on these countries and limit financial support for Russia's military activities in Ukraine. The new measures include a 6.5% tariff on fertilizers, with additional duties escalating from 40 to 45 euros per tonne in 2025 to 2026 to 430 euros per tonne by 2028. An extra 50% duty will apply to certain agricultural products such as meat, dairy, fruit and vegetables. These tariffs are set to take effect on July 1st. EU lawmakers argue that these tariffs will help prevent Russia from using the EU market to finance its military efforts and encourage diversification of fertilizer sources within the EU. However, European farmers have expressed concerns about potential increases in production costs and the impact on food prices.
We need to stop financing Russia's war in Ukraine. War is right next to our external borders. Stopping it, it's needed for our safety. Thank you.
The present level of imports from the Russian Federation, competing unfairly in the EU market due to gas price differences, is undermining the EU industry. At the same time, it is essential to ensure that the Union farmers have predictable, sufficient and affordable access to nitrogen-based fertilizers, as this is indispensable to the stabilization of the EU agricultural markets.
The decision has sparked criticism from the Kremlin, with spokesperson Dmitry Peskov stating that the EU will face higher costs and lower quality fertilizers as a result. Peskov emphasized that Russian fertilizers are of high quality and that global demand remains strong, suggesting that other markets will compensate for the EU's reduced imports. The legislation still requires formal approval from EU member states, which have indicated support for the measures. The European Commission has committed to monitoring the impact on the internal market and taking action to mitigate any negative effects on the EU agriculture sector.
Finance ministers from G7 nations have concluded their summit in Banff, issuing a joint statement that underscores unity in tackling global economic challenges. While US tariffs were not explicitly mentioned, the Canadian finance minister emphasised that the discussions were open and constructive.
The G7 Finance Ministers Summit in Banff in Canada ended Thursday with officials emphasising unity in addressing global economic challenges, despite underlying tensions over US tariffs and trade policies. The joint communiqué focused on combating non-market practices, implicitly referencing China's trade behaviours, and reaffirmed support for Ukraine, including maintaining sanctions against Russia.
We had very constructive and productive discussion. We understand that we need to reduce uncertainty in order to increase growth. I think, we went back to basics. For me, this G7 is back to basic, back to the core mission. Our mission, my mission when I entered the room, was really to promote stability and growth. And I would say of all the international meetings I've attended, this was one where you had frank discussion, that people shared views on different issues, but also there was a strong call to actions. We found common ground on a number of things. If you look at the communique.
While the communique did not directly mention US tariffs, Canadian Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne asserted that the issue was not avoided during discussions, highlighting the group's commitment to open dialogue.
There's no doubt that there's discussion around that policy of tariff by the United States, but I would say there's also a very constructive discussion about what's the way forward that we can adopt and where can we find common ground to tackle other global challenges. Canada is the biggest customer in the United States. I always say we buy more from the United States than China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. So it's quite normal when you meet your biggest customer that there's a lot to discuss,
The summit sets the stage for the upcoming G7 leaders meeting in Kananaskis in Alberta on the 15th of June.
A Chicago-born man has been charged in a deadly shooting outside a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C. Elias Rodriguez faces multiple federal counts, including first-degree murder and murder of foreign officials. It comes after 2 Israeli embassy workers were killed after a diplomatic event hosted by the American Jewish Committee on Wednesday night. Authorities say the 30-year-old shouted "Free Palestine" during his arrest and is being investigated for possible hate crime and terrorism links. The victims were a young couple soon to be engaged. The White House says that negotiations between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about a deal with Iran were progressing in a positive direction after they spoke on Thursday. White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt told reporters that the deal with Tehran could end in one of 2 ways, either with a positive diplomatic resolution or with a much more negative outcome for Iran. Leavitt said the president was committed to pursuing diplomacy to avoid the latter scenario. A 5th round of nuclear talks are expected on Friday in Rome. However, Iran's foreign minister said that if the US insists on completely stopping uranium enrichment, there will be no deal.
Not just Prime Minister Netanyahu, but also the world.
Protesters and families of hostages in Tel Aviv expressed disappointment after Israel's top negotiators returned from Qatar on Thursday without securing a ceasefire agreement with Hamas. This development has intensified public frustration, with demonstrators urging the government to take decisive action to end the conflict and secure the release of hostages. They say the lack of progress in talks has only heightened public frustration. The Israeli government has not provided detailed reasons for the delegation's return. Climate activists stormed BNP Paribas in Paris, accusing the bank of fueling fossil fuel projects by French energy giant Total Energies. The protest comes amid rising investor pressure at the company's annual shareholders meeting for greater climate accountability.
Climate activists from Extinction Rebellion entered BNP Paribas Paris offices on Friday. A small group of protesters went into the building, staging their demonstration with fake banknotes and champagne before police removed them. They accused the bank of financing Total Energies' fossil fuel expansion. Activists criticised the company's controversial projects, calling them an environmental and human rights disaster.
Total Energies is the emblem of companies that are harmful from a climate point of view with absolute cynicism. We must still remember that their oil extraction project in Uganda is a disaster, but not only an environmental one.
BNP Paribas condemned the protest as aggressive, but reaffirmed its commitment to supporting the energy transition. The demonstration happened during Total Energies' annual shareholders meeting, where investors are demanding greater accountability on climate issues. Important issues include human rights and biodiversity related to the East African crude oil pipeline and upcoming fossil fuel projects in Mozambique and Namibia. In 2023, bank faced similar protests and criticism for its role financing the pipeline. Activists criticised BNP Paribas of arranging an $8 billion loan to TotalEnergies to support various projects across Africa. That year, environmental groups also filed a lawsuit accusing the bank of worsening the climate crisis. Since then, BNP Paribas has pledged to stop investing in new oil and gas bonds, but critics say this is not enough. Activists vow to continue their fight, demanding banks cut ties with fossil fuels entirely to protect the planet's future.
The US government science agency has warned this year's incoming Atlantic hurricane season is expected to be busier than usual. That's just as cuts to American research are raising fears about the ability to track and prepare for these deadly storms.
The US is bracing for what could be another devastating hurricane season. Government scientists warn that the rate of storms in 2025 will be above normal, and it's expected to begin in just over a week's time. According to the National Weather Service, the US can expect up to 19 major tropical storms, with at least 6 to 10 of them becoming hurricanes. That's compared to around 7 in an average year. Last year was one of the costliest on record. 427 lives lost and $130 billion in damages. But experts say this year could be worse, with winds of at least 179 kilometers per hour expected. There are some concerns, though, of the US's ability to protect its citizens.
We need help to be able to really reach out to the communities to let them know the dangers of war.
Budget cuts by President Donald Trump's administration could endanger efforts to monitor these hurricanes and predict where they might hit. With hurricane season stretching all the way to November, preparations are already underway. And for many communities, it's not about bracing for the storm, but surviving its aftermath.
Harvard's large international student body now faces uncertainty as President Trump's government challenges its visa program over allegations of anti-Semitism and foreign influence. By revoking Harvard's visa privileges, the government says it's demanding greater transparency about foreign students' activities and potential security risks.
The Trump administration has revoked Harvard University's ability to enroll international students. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem made the announcement on Thursday, ordering the termination of Harvard's Student and Exchange Visitor Program certification. It means the university can no longer issue visas to new foreign students. Existing students must transfer or risk losing their legal status. Noem accused Harvard of fostering violence, anti-Semitism and coordinating with the Chinese Communist Party. The move escalates the administration's campaign against Harvard, one of its main institutional targets. Jay Green, a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation, supports the decision and argues that elite universities should prioritize American perspectives.
So I don't believe it's illegal. Foreign student visas are a privilege, not an entitlement. In particular, students cannot enter the United States if they provide support for designated terrorist organizations. They wouldn't be allowed to enter the United States. The Trump administration wants to remove students who've provided support to designated terrorist organizations like Hamas, and they want to be able to know which students have done that. So they want access to disciplinary records and to videos of protests.
Harvard rejected the allegations, saying it was illegal and amounted to retaliation, and promised to support its foreign students. Legal experts say Harvard's ongoing lawsuit aims to negotiate a better deal, but the administration's position remains firm.
I think the Trump administration is demonstrating that they're going to prevail in this fight with Harvard. I know that people think Harvard has over $50 billion in endowment and they're, have this status and this history. That's all true, but the federal government is bigger and richer and will prevail here in this fight.
According to the university data, Harvard's international student population for this academic year reached nearly 6,800, making up 27% of the university's total population.
Turkey is deepening its energy and reconstruction ties with Syria. Ankara has announced it will begin exporting natural gas and dramatically increase electricity exports in the coming months to Damascus. The move comes as part of broader efforts to aid Syria's recovery and boost bilateral cooperation in energy and infrastructure.
Ankara will soon begin natural gas exports to Syria, totaling 2 billion cubic meters annually. The exports are expected to enhance electricity generation in key Syrian regions, including Aleppo and Homs. It's after Turkey and Syria signed a comprehensive framework agreement on cooperation in energy, mining and hydrocarbons on Thursday. Turkey's Minister of Energy and Natural Resources Alparslan Bayraktar made the announcement at a joint press conference with Syrian Energy Minister Mohammed al-Bashir in Damascus.
Biz buraya Halep'e kadar ve Humus'a kadar gelebilecek şekilde yıllık yaklaşık 2 milyar metreküplük.
We have also intensified our efforts regarding natural gas. We will soon begin exporting gas that will reach Aleppo and Homs, providing an additional contribution of approximately 1,300 megawatts of electricity generation in the region, with an annual volume of around 2 billion cubic meters.
Bir yoğun çalışmayı kendileriyle ve ekipleriyle birlikte yürütüyoruz.
The minister pointed out that with the easing of international sanctions, Syria will have access to crucial investment and financing opportunities. Bayraktar added that Turkey is ready to support Syria's development and is committed to working on projects that will improve living conditions for the Syrian people.
Ve son olarak şunu ifade edeyim. Burada bugün birlikte imzaladığımız enerji ve madenler alanında
The framework agreement we have just signed in the fields of energy, mining and carbon resources constitutes an important roadmap for our future cooperation.
Daha farklı anlaşmaları imzalarken bundan sonra daha sık göreceksiniz.
Minister al-Bashir confirmed that the natural gas pipeline extending from Turkey's Kilis district into Syria will become operational by June. He added that Turkish firms will play a central role in the mining and electricity distribution sectors, while joint technical units will be established to further cooperation across various energy domains. This renewed energy partnership marks a significant step in regional diplomacy and infrastructure rebuilding, laying the groundwork for broader economic ties between the two neighboring countries.
Now, following the fall of the Assad regime, the EU adopted a gradual and reversible approach to support Syria's transition and economic recovery. In February, the EU suspended some of its economic sanctions, and recently Kaja Kallas stated that the EU is planning to lift the remaining sanctions on Syria. To unpack the latest developments, we are joined by Dilara Aslan, Ankara Bureau Chief at Daily Sabah. Thanks for being with us. Now, what steps will follow the EU's official decision to lift economic sanctions?
Yes, with especially the US announcing the lifting of sanctions followed by the EU, more countries will be ensured that they can initiate again diplomatic ties and economic ties with the new Syrian government after 14 years of the Bashar Assad regime ruling the country, and the country being suffering from decades-long, in some cases, sanctions by various countries. So this has been actually constituting a historic opportunity for Syria, as the country has been ravaged by war, its economy has been brought to a halt, and we can say that still currently 90% of Syria's population is in need of health and is facing economic challenges. So now what we are seeing is, first of all, hope in the eyes of the Syrian people, because it is a new opportunity. They expect that investment will come into the country and that they will again be allowed into the international banking systems and the reintegration of the country into the international monetary system. So this will also facilitate, for example, Syrian families abroad, the Syrian refugees who had been living for over a decade in several countries, have been working there, to be able to send money back home, back to their relatives. On the other side, another important outcome of the EU and US lifting sanctions is that the country is in immediate need of reconstruction. The country is currently out of services ranging from roads, schools, hospitals, and now investment. And the country being able to transfer money within the country as well as from outside the country will enable it to give services to the people right now.
Now, thinking about the decision itself, what impact did Turkey's role in Syria have on the EU making this decision?
Turkey has been, since the fall of the Assad regime, been rallying the international community and especially the US and the EU, as you mentioned, to facilitate the lifting of sanctions on the new government, because Turkey has been underlining this. The new government is in every aspect better than what we saw in the Assad regime, which had been killing its own citizens and which had been constituting corruption within the country. So that is why Turkey has been advocating that stability is needed in the country, both for the sake of the region and for the EU, because the EU has also been indirectly suffering, for example, from migration. Although Turkey has been hosting the largest community of Syrian refugees, the EU has also been impacted, especially the Eastern European countries like Greece, Bulgaria, and Italy have been very deeply affected by the migration crisis, which has brought also, of course, economic challenges and even rising xenophobia right now in the EU. This has been leading to, for example, populist regimes rising in the country, the people of the Western nations being criticizing their governments for the large number of refugees. So with the lifting of the sanctions, this was Turkey's argument, the EU would indeed both helping the Middle East and itself.
Really interesting. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme. Now, President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev welcomed interior ministers from the Organisation of Turkic States in Baku. The meeting brought together high-level officials from Turkey, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Northern Cyprus, Hungary and the OTS Secretariat. President Aliyev stressed the importance of unity among Turkic nations, saying the organisation is built on shared roots, values and growing economic strength. He highlighted the need for closer cooperation between interior ministries to ensure stability and counter external threats. The President also noted Azerbaijan's role in launching informal OTS summits, with the next official summit set to be hosted in the country later this year. OTS Secretary-General Kobanchibek Aliyev thanked Azerbaijan, highlighting the growing cooperation across law enforcement and judicial platforms. Azerbaijan's ambassador to Brussels and Luxembourg stated that meaningful and open discussions on political and security cooperation were discussed at the 6th European Union and Azerbaijan Security Dialogue in Brussels on Thursday. The meeting was co-chaired by Hikmet Hajiev, Assistant to the President of Azerbaijan, and Olaf Skog, Deputy Secretary-General of the European External Action Service. This meeting follows recent high-level engagements in Malta, Baku, Brussels and Tirana, underscoring the importance of regular dialogue amid evolving regional and global developments. Azerbaijan is once again taking the lead against Islamophobia. For the third year in a row, Baku is hosting an international conference tackling anti-Muslim sentiment. Launched after a UN resolution making March 15th the International Day to Combat Islamophobia, the Baku conference has become a key platform for global dialogue. This year, 12 major organisations are taking part. The focus goes beyond faith, addressing modern challenges like AI, digital media and new forms of discrimination.
İslam dünyasıyla bağlı, İslamophobia ile bağlı. Biz konferansı
In our foreign policy, combating Islamophobia and promoting Islamic unity are key priorities. But it's also important to take practical steps, both at the government level and through think tanks. This is something we've consistently done over the past 3 years. What does this show? It shows that Baku is truly becoming a hub for political and academic dialogue. There's now a growing network, be it scholars or public figures from Europe or the Middle East, who stay engaged even after the conference. Research papers are being written and follow-up contact is maintained.
The message from Baku is clear. Together, we intend to take more informed, coordinated and concrete actions. We aim to send a strong message, not only to international organizations, but also to governments and political centers, especially in regions where Islamophobia is alarmingly severe, that these practices must be eliminated. Unfortunately, the situation is worsening. Discrimination is on the rise, and most concerningly, it is being normalized, particularly in countries that claim to uphold liberal values. This is unacceptable to us. That is why we firmly believe the number of supporting organizations will grow in the coming years. Already, many distinguished experts, academics, public figures, and religious leaders are taking part in this conference, each playing a unique and important role.
Georgia has strongly condemned Lithuania's decision to cancel visa-free travel for Georgian diplomatic and service passport holders. The Speaker of the Georgian Parliament called the move a gross and legally unfounded violation of the 2010 EU-Georgia visa agreement, stressing the need to respect international commitments. Meanwhile, Lithuania has ordered its foreign ministry to notify EU and fellow member states within 5 days. Earlier this month, Estonia took the same step. Staying with Georgia, new regulations prohibit Russian and Belarusian citizens from using Georgian territory to re-export cars and vehicle equipment. Previously, while re-exports to Russia and Belarus were banned, citizens of those countries could still export vehicles from Georgia to third countries. That loophole has now been closed. Joining us live from Tbilisi with more on this is Dr Vakhtang Msaya, Head of Geopolitical Research at the Jordan Strategic Analysis Centre. Thank you for joining us. So, why was this measure implemented now?
Okay, thank you very much for having me here. I would like to greet to your audience and to you. Just about this measure is about countermeasure because Russia just aggressively behaved against Georgia for a long time ago. Even just this measure, I think so, it's just about too late, considering that even just about Russia, about 2 days ago, the President Vladimir Putin announced a plan to automatically just provide Russian citizenship to the all populations residing in occupied territories of Abkhazia. And of course, some latest before, it was announced that Vladimir Putin just wants to pay official visit to so-called Abkhazia and occupied territory of Abkhazia. And of course, this is absolutely indicated Russia wants to also annex the Georgian sovereign territory of Abkhazia as the same way as he did with regard to Ukrainian Crimea. So I think so the Georgian government steadily just wanted to demonstrate it's just about strict attitudes toward these actions. Upon to my mind, is not enough. It's absolutely not enough because it's only about petty and tiny about measures what Georgian government dare to demonstrate against Russia. Unfortunately, I guess the Georgian government should also just have much more strict measures and counter more just tough behaves with regard about Russian.
So thinking about the measure itself, let's stick with that. Could this be seen as part of a broader effort by the Georgian government to improve relations with Washington?
No, I'm not sure that this is also linked about to improve relations with Washington. No, I guess Georgia unilaterally decided to act toward this Russia's just about authorities, which very aggressively behaved against Georgia, underscore these provisions. And this about the Georgian some sovereign step toward to demonstrate that Georgia could also absolutely have done the mirror effects against Russians. Russia's aggressiveness foreign policy towards Georgia, not only Georgia, but also Russia also show up its very aggressive positions toward the other just about South Caucasus states and nations. And I guess so that it's only just about a minor effect or minor measures which Georgian government just put forward.
Really interesting insights there. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme. Now, Armenia's shadow economy grew sharply, with hidden business turnover rising by around $220 million. This amounts to a 146% increase compared to last year. The head of Armenia's State Revenue Committee said this caused the government to miss out on $110 million worth of taxes, 80% more than in the same period of 2024. He added that tax inspections were done at fewer businesses this year, but authorities still uncovered $117 million in unpaid taxes. Uzbekistan has set an ambitious goal to welcome 15 million tourists by the end of this year. The plans were announced during a video conference chaired by President Shavkat Mirziyoyev. Officials say easing travel rules and expanding international partnerships will be key to reaching that goal.
Uzbekistan is preparing to simplify entry rules for citizens of Russia, Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan. Under the new plan, travelers from these countries could soon be allowed to enter Uzbekistan for up to 30 days using only a national ID card. For children, a so-called kinder passport would serve as a valid travel document. Currently, this simplified procedure applies only to citizens of Kyrgyzstan. The agreement between Tashkent and Bishkek came into force in 2023, making Kyrgyzstan the first country whose citizens can enter Uzbekistan using ID cards. The new measures are outlined in a presidential decree signed on May 15th. The document instructs the Minister of Internal Affairs to begin negotiations with Russia, Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan within the next 3 months. The decree also includes a proposal to introduce a visa-free regime for US citizens, allowing them to stay in Uzbekistan for up to 30 days. At the same time, the government plans to hold talks with Washington on easing visa restrictions for Uzbek nationals. The push is part of a broader tourism strategy. By the end of 2025, Uzbekistan aims to reach 15.8 million international visits, bringing $4 billion in tourism revenue and encourage 40 million domestic trips. Nearly 400 new tour operators are also expected to launch across the country. And starting June 1st, travelers from Bahrain, Kuwait and Oman will also be allowed to enter Uzbekistan visa-free for up to 30 days, a step toward closer ties with the Gulf region. Tourism numbers are already rising. In April alone, more than 1 million foreign visitors arrived. And in 2024, Uzbekistan hit a major milestone, over 10 million international tourists in a single year for the first time. Fariza Kalimurzina, AnewZ, in Almaty, Kazakhstan.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to AnewZ.